Backstory. I rented a room in a 2-ish bedroom apartment while I was at university. I rented from the current tenant who was living in the living room, which had been turned into a bedroom. Her story was that she had rented the place with her friend who had the official bedroom, but had moved out after finishing her degree. At the time, I was desperate for a place. I was living on an acquaintance's sofa for a month while trying to find my own place, so I was probably a bit more trusting than I should have been. In my defense, the contract I signed had the letterhead of the building on it, so I assumed it was legit. I figured out there was something wrong, though, after about a month when she told me that she was going away for a week and to not bother the people in the reception office and do not collect any packages that arrive in that time. Up to that point, she had always picked up the mail and any packages that were delivered by the time I had returned from classes, so I never had a reason to go fetch anything before. This was the first inkling I had that there was an issue. I ignored her, by the way, and never had any issues. The front desk staff and the maintenance guys knew me and liked me well enough so they never caused trouble or asked too many questions. The mailroom lady even said she preferred when I picked up the mail because I was polite, unlike the woman I live with. Fast forward a year and things started to get strange. My roomie was a party girl that would keep strange hours and was trying to get herself set up in her dream job. She managed to get herself hired, but they needed a copy of her working visa. Pin drop. Turned out she had come to the country as a student on a student visa and overstayed by several years. Up to that point, all of her employment had been under the table, cash in hand sort of gigs, and she had a line of sugar daddies as long as the Nile River, so she never had to prove working rights. This is where it really started to hit the fan. A letter arrived from the Department of Immigration. It was a notice of deportation. The potential employer had reported her when she couldn't provide a valid visa. She freaked and got a lawyer who told her to go back to her home country and apply for a working visa from there. She thought it would all be okay, so she left everything she owned minus 3 suitcases worth of stuff and went home for a vacation. Before leaving, she told me that she was going to rent her half of the apartment so she didn't have to pay rent and got upset when I raised concerns about a stranger moving in. Keep in mind that I had gone home for 3 months and had to still pay rent because she refused to let me sublet because it made her uncomfortable. We argued because I wanted to at least meet the person who would live with me, and the roomie got all pissed but begrudgingly agreed to let me meet them. I was also concerned because by this stage I had confronted her about the fact that she was illegally subletting to me and didn't want some other poor girl in this situation too. Anyways, she left the country and I had the place to myself for a month before a short-term replacement moved in. She was a nice girl who just needed a place for 1 month while she was in town for work, which suited Rumi just fine because she thought she would be back by then. 3 weeks after the new girl moved in, the roomie called freaking out because her application for a visa was denied and she was banned for several years for overstaying. She said the lawyer was contesting it, but it would be a few months, so she would place another ad for a replacement sublet once the current one moved out in a week. Oh, joy. Whatever, I was wrapped up with school, and the place was finally not a flophouse for party animals. The new tenant is found. A 3-month rental was settled on because she was only in town as an exchange student for 1 term. Around this time, I decided to move in with my then-boyfriend as we were getting engaged. As per my lease, I gave Rumi just over a month's notice. She freaked. First, she demanded that I pay her an additional month's rent on top of the last month's rent that was already paid when I moved in. Because I was causing her trouble, I said no. Then she told me that I had to be out in 2 weeks so she could rent the place faster. I told her that wasn't possible because I was in the middle of finals and she would just have to deal. This is where she went off the rails. She started threatening me. She threatened that her guy friend would come to beat me up, threatened that she would have someone who had a spare key come over and throw me and my stuff out. I blocked her and started frantically trying to get my stuff moved out. While all this was going on, Rumi started threatening and harassing the temp girl to try and get her to force me to pay more rent money and to get out sooner. Now, onto the revenge. The temp girl and I discussed what was happening. Rumi had told her to tell me that she was going to call the building and have me thrown out for trespassing. I decided to call her bluff and went to the building manager. explained everything and asked how long I had to get my stuff out. They already knew I was an illegal sublet and didn't really care as long as things were civil and on the down low. But this changed everything. Manager asked for a copy of my lease and a letter from me telling them all that had happened, including how I came to rent the place, why there had been other sublets, the whole story. Temp Girl also provided a letter as she had decided to move out too. This is where it gets even better. Temp tells Rumi that she will be leaving as well due to a change of plans. This is fine with Rumi as she has made arrangements for one of her other friends to take over the lease temporarily. So Rumi sends a guy friend around the night before Temp is to move out to inspect the place to make sure it's clean. He gets there and has no idea what has happened or what sort of show he walked into. First, he FaceTime her, and she goes ballistic that all my furniture is gone. It was my stuff, I bought it in, but she thought since I was moving in with a guy that I would leave it all for the next tenant. Never did figure out why, other than she was probably hoping to advertise it as a furnished room. Then she tells Temp she wants her out immediately that night. Keep in mind, it's also almost midnight at this point and Temp has no place to go. She then tells her guy friend to repay Temp the last month of rent, since that is what they agree to. This guy was not told this prior, and he had to fork over nearly $1,000 in cash from his own pocket. So this guy says he has to go get the cash and will be right back. He hangs up and leaves while Temp comes over to the neighbor's place where I'm waiting in case she needs help. We were friends with the neighbor and tells me what happened. Guy friend gets back and we all go out to meet him. He is a nice guy and feels like a jerk if he kicks a woman out on the street in the middle of the night, so he says he will let her sleep the night there and will just come back in the morning before work to lock the place up. I think he was also pissed at the surprises that were sprung on him that night too. The final revenge came about 2 weeks later when the owners canceled the lease and sent a notice of eviction. Rumi had 1 week to move out, and since she was in another country, she had to try and organize it all from there. I spent time hanging out with the neighbor who I had made friends with, and no one ever came to clean the place out. After the eviction deadline, maintenance came in and changed the locks and cleared the place out. There was over $3,000 worth of furniture and God knows how much designer clothing, shoes, and bags that were just left there. I found out later through a mutual acquaintance that Rumi had started crying to all her friends that it was all my fault and that I got her kicked out and deported and cost her all this money, so she had nothing to pay anyone with to store her stuff and ship it back to her home country. Basically, she tried to get her friends to not only clean the place out, but ship all of it to her. I, 25, have several foreign family members, mostly from Germany and Scandinavia. We often speak in their native languages, but this story primarily involves the German members of my family. One day, I was shopping with my cousins Carlette and Gunther, not their real names, at a shopping center in my hometown. Since they don't speak English very well, we conversed in German. As we were discussing filmmaking, a woman and her 2 non-entitled girls, aged around 9 and 13, walked in. We continued our conversation until the older girl approached us. Girl 1. What are you talking about? Nee, they don't speak English very well, so they are conversing in German. Girl 1. That's cool. She is interrupted by Girl 2. Girl 2. Mom's gonna know about this. She grabbed Girl 1 by the arm and pulled her back to their mother, who started shouting furiously at Girl 1 for simply talking to us. Gunther, confused, said in German, "Why is she so angry at her? She didn't bother us." Carlette was worried for the girl's safety. That mother is really psychotic. At this point, the mother shouted at the girl just for asking us what we were talking about. One would think she would stop shouting and go about her merry way. But no, she came back around the corner, seething with anger. Entitled, "Mom, tell your freaking cousins to speak English, or I will get you thrown out. Their language is evil and not welcome here in America." Then she spewed an insulting remark about German people. Anger surged within me and Gunther. I responded, "Me, they don't speak English. They only speak German. Why do you have a problem with that?" Entitled, "Mom, their languages are evil. They corrupt our children and lead them to heresy. It's rude on top of it." Before I could reply, Carlotte, with the thickest Pomeranian accent ever, spoke up. Carlotte, if Germanic languages are evil, what about English? The entitled mom stumbled over her words, desperately searching for a response. Me. Also, why would you scream at your kids in a store for no reason? Girl 1 cracked a smile at Carlotte's comment. I could tell we made her day. However, the mom didn't want to look foolish and attempted to call her husband, claiming he was the store owner. He arrived, but found that no rules were broken and we weren't causing a scene. He apologized for his wife's behavior, explaining that her grandfather had preached anti-German rhetoric before he passed away. The Karen left after her plan had backfired. We eventually got what we needed and left the store. Afterwards, I asked Carlotte why she said what she did. She said it was because she was detached from the present. We laughed about it when we got back home. Clearly, this mom hadn't learned about the history of the English language and its origins from Germania. Back in my middle school days, I had a Colombian Spanish teacher who initially appeared cheerful but kept her true personality hidden. However, as time passed, she became an absolute nightmare. The whole class despised her for valid reasons. During our book discussions, she would ask for our interpretations of the meanings. If she didn't approve of your answer, she would publicly call you out and hurl insults at you, using Spanish words like idiota and tonto. One ordinary day, our assignment was to read a few chapters of our books and write a 2-page essay. I completed the task, feeling quite satisfied with my work. I went to hand it in, but she had the audacity to tell me that it was garbage, and that I should be ashamed of myself. She had just humiliated me in front of everyone. From that moment on, my resentment towards her grew stronger. When it came time for students to evaluate their teachers, I filled out her evaluation forms with zeros across the board. As a result, the principal called me into his office to discuss my feedback. I seized the opportunity and shared the truth about our Spanish teacher, how she demeaned students, used foul language, and hurled insults. The principal granted me permission to use a tape recorder during class to capture any instances of misconduct. If she continued her inappropriate behavior, she would be dismissed. I concealed the tape recorder in my bag, which I placed on my desk for easy access. Sure enough, a few weeks later, she directed her wrath towards a classmate who had forgotten to bring his homework. She verbally attacked him, calling him a lazy, good-for-nothing kid. Luckily, my tape recorder captured it all. As soon as the class ended, I headed straight to the principal's office and presented the evidence. Thankfully, we bid farewell to the nightmarish teacher who haunted our classroom.